Have you ever stopped to think why some people seem to have an inexplicable gift for being late? Or why you always cry at that movie you've watched 1,000 times? And that annoying person who talks non-stop? Could there be a scientific reason for it? The truth is, your brain is hiding secrets about yourself that even you don't know. While you think you're in control of your actions, there's an entire psychological universe operating behind the scenes, dictating behaviors that you judge in others, without realizing you're part of them too. Get ready, because what you're about to discover will turn your perception upside down. I'm going to reveal 6 behavioral patterns that science has uncovered, but are rarely discussed openly. These are uncomfortable, fascinating, and absolutely real truths about human nature. After this video, you'll never look at people, or yourself, the same way again. 1. The mystery of people who are always late. Time is supposed to be the same for everyone, right? 24 hours, 60 minutes in each hour, yet somehow there are people who seem to exist in a completely different temporal dimension. They're the ones rushing through the door 10 minutes after the meeting started, breathless and full of excuses. But here's what nobody tells you. Chronic lateness isn't about bad time management or laziness. It's something far more fascinating happening in their brains. Scientists have discovered that people who consistently arrive late actually experience time differently than the rest of us. Their internal clock runs at a different speed. When they think 5 minutes have passed, it might actually be 15. It's not intentional disrespect or carelessness. Their brain is literally playing tricks on them, stretching and compressing moments in ways they can't consciously control. But there's more to this story. Research shows that these individuals often have what psychologists call an optimistic time bias. They genuinely believe they can accomplish more in less time than is physically possible. It's like their mind creates a fantasy version of reality where traffic doesn't exist. Every task takes half the time it actually does, and the universe bends to their schedule. They'll think they can shower, get dressed, make breakfast, answer emails, and drive across town in 20 minutes. Spoiler alert, they can't. What makes this even more interesting is the emotional component. Many chronically late people are actually thrill seekers without even knowing it. That rush of adrenaline when they're cutting it close, the heart-pounding race against the clock, it actually gives them a chemical reward in their brain. It's like a drug they don't realize they're addicted to. The stress that would make most of us miserable becomes their normal operating mode. There's also a deeper psychological layer here. Some research suggests that perpetual lateness can be a subtle form of control, not in a manipulative way, but more like an unconscious need to operate on their own terms in a world that constantly demands conformity. When everything in life has a deadline, a schedule, a rigid structure, being late becomes a small act of rebellion. It's their way of saying they exist outside the boxes society tries to put them in. The brain chemistry behind this is genuinely remarkable. These individuals often have different levels of dopamine, the neurotransmitter responsible for motivation and reward. Their brain literally processes deadlines and time pressure differently. What feels urgent to most people might not trigger the same response in their nervous system until the very last second. It's only when the deadline is breathing down their neck that their brain finally kicks into high gear. Here's the thing that will blow your mind. Many of these chronically late individuals are actually highly creative and innovative thinkers. Their loose relationship with time often comes packaged with an ability to think outside conventional boundaries. They're the ones who come up with unexpected solutions, who see connections others miss, precisely because their brain doesn't operate in the same linear, time-bound way. The same trait that makes them infuriating in meetings might make them brilliant in brainstorming sessions. But let's be honest about the real cost. Chronic lateness affects relationships, careers, and self-esteem. People start to see them as unreliable, even when they're incredibly competent in other areas. The late person themselves often feels guilty, frustrated, and misunderstood. They make promises to themselves to be on time. They set multiple alarms, they genuinely try, but their brain keeps betraying them. The most surprising discovery is that this trait often runs in families, suggesting a genetic component. If your parents were always late, there's a good chance you inherited not just their habits, but their actual neurological wiring. It's passed down like eye color or height, except it determines how you experience the flow of time itself. Understanding this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it does explain it. It transforms lateness from a character flaw into a neurological quirk. And knowing this changes everything about how we judge these people, and maybe how they judge themselves. But time perception is just one piece of the puzzle. While some people struggle to arrive on time, others have the exact opposite problem, and the psychology behind that is equally mind-blowing. 2. Why some people always arrive early. If lateness is one end of the spectrum, there's an entirely different breed of human on the other side. These are the people who show up 15 minutes before anything starts. They're already seated when you walk in. Their coffee is half finished. They've checked their phone 3 times and organized their thoughts while everyone else is still finding parking. And just like chronic lateness, arriving early isn't really about respecting other people's time. It's about something much deeper happening in their psychology. Early arrivers carry a very specific type of anxiety that most people don't recognize. It's not the obvious panic attack kind of anxiety. It's quieter, more insidious. It's the constant background hum of what if something goes wrong. Their brain is always running disaster scenarios. What if there's traffic? What if they can't find the place? What if they need time to compose themselves? So they build in buffers, layers of protection against a world that feels fundamentally unpredictable. This behavior often starts in childhood. Maybe they had a parent who was always stressed about being late, and they absorbed that tension. Or perhaps they experienced a significant consequence from being late once, and their brain turned it into a core fear. The mind has this incredible ability to take one bad experience and turn it into a lifelong pattern. That's exactly what happens here. One moment of embarrassment or consequence becomes the foundation for decades of arriving early. But there's another fascinating element. People who consistently arrive early tend to have a stronger need for control than average. Not in a bossy or dominating way, but in how they manage their own experience of life. Being early gives them a sense of mastery over circumstances. They've beaten the chaos. They've won against the possibility of things going wrong. In those extra 15 minutes before something starts, they feel safe, prepared, in command of their environment. The neuroscience reveals something surprising. Early arrivers often have more active amygdalas, the part of the brain responsible for detecting threats. Their nervous system is constantly scanning for danger, and lateness registers as a threat. So, arriving early becomes a way to soothe that overactive alarm system. It's self-medication through punctuality. Every time they arrive with time to spare, their brain gets a little hit of relief, reinforcing the behavior. There's also a social component that runs deep. Many early arrivers have a profound fear of being judged. They worry that arriving late will make people think they're irresponsible, careless, or disrespectful. So they overcorrect massively. If being 5 minutes late is bad, being 15 minutes early must be safe. It's not really about the actual time. It's about managing how they believe others perceive them. What's really interesting is how this connects to their relationship with uncertainty. Life is inherently unpredictable. Things happen that we can't control. Most people accept this and roll with it. But early arrivers struggle with that acceptance. They need to feel like they're managing the variables, even when they can't. Arriving early is their way of imposing order on chaos, of creating certainty where none exists. Research shows that these individuals often excel in careers that require precision and reliability. They're the ones you want managing complex projects, handling details, ensuring nothing falls through the cracks. Their tendency to arrive early translates into a broader pattern of thoroughness and preparation. What looks like simple punctuality is actually a window into how their entire mind operates. But here's the hidden cost. Constant early arrival can actually be exhausting. They're always operating with a buffer of stress, always anticipating problems, never fully relaxed. That extra 15 minutes isn't free time, it's worry time. It's their brain running through all the things that could still go wrong, even though they've already arrived. The anxiety doesn't end when they get there early. It just shifts to different concerns. Many early arrivers also struggle with being present in the moment. They're so focused on what's coming next, on being prepared for the future, that they have trouble enjoying what's happening right now. Their mind is always 3 steps ahead, calculating, planning, anticipating. It's a form of time travel that keeps them from fully inhabiting their current experience. The most profound insight is that both chronic lateness and chronic earliness are really about the same thing: difficulty accepting time as it actually is. One group tries to stretch it, the other tries to compress it. Both are fighting against reality in their own way. Neither is experiencing time in a relaxed, natural flow. They're just managing their anxiety through opposite strategies. Understanding this creates compassion. The person who shows up ridiculously early isn't trying to make you feel bad about your own timing. They're just managing their internal world the only way they know how. But time perception isn't the only hidden force shaping behavior. The way people respond emotionally reveals even more about the invisible workings of the mind. 3. The secret science behind tears at the movies. You're sitting in a dark theater, surrounded by strangers, watching flickering images on a screen. You know it's not real. You know those are actors saying scripted lines. You're fully aware that none of this is actually happening. And yet, tears are streaming down your face. Your throat tightens. Your chest aches. You're emotionally devastated by something you consciously know is fiction. How does that make any sense? The answer reveals something profound about how your brain works. Crying during movies isn't a sign of being overly sensitive or emotional. It's actually a sign of a highly developed imagination and empathy system. Your brain has this incredible ability to suspend disbelief so completely that it reacts to fictional situations as if they were real threats or real losses. The emotional centers of your brain can't always distinguish between lived experience and vividly imagined experience. When you're deeply immersed in a story, your nervous system responds as if you're actually there. This happens because of mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that fire both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform that action. When you see an actor portraying grief, your mirror neurons activate the same patterns that would fire if you were experiencing grief yourself. Your brain is literally mirroring the emotion, creating a genuine physiological response to something that isn't happening to you. But here's where it gets really interesting. People who cry during movies actually process emotions more deeply than those who don't. They're not weaker or more fragile. They're more emotionally intelligent. They have a stronger ability to connect with human experiences beyond their own immediate life. This capacity for emotional resonance is what builds empathy, understanding, and connection in real relationships. The tears themselves serve a purpose beyond just expressing emotion. Emotional crying releases different chemicals than crying from physical pain or irritation. When you cry from sadness or joy, your body releases endorphins and other feel-good chemicals. It's actually a self-soothing mechanism. Your brain creates a situation where you feel intense emotion, then immediately provides relief from that intensity. It's like emotional exercise, flexing your feelings in a safe environment. Movies provide something crucial that real life often doesn't: permission to feel without consequence. In daily life, you have to hold it together. You have to be professional, composed, functional. But in a dark theater, you can let everything go. Nobody knows you're crying. There's no judgment, no need to explain yourself, no social consequences. It's one of the few spaces where adults are allowed to feel things fully and freely. There's also a fascinating connection to unprocessed emotions. Sometimes you cry at a movie scene that doesn't seem particularly sad, and you wonder why it hit you so hard. Often, it's because the story touched something in your own life that you haven't fully dealt with. The movie becomes a safe container for feelings you've been pushing down. You're not really crying about the fictional character. You're crying about your own experiences that the story brought to the surface. The type of movies that make you cry also reveals something about your inner world. If you cry at stories about family, it might reflect your own family dynamics and what you long for or fear losing. If you cry at stories about sacrifice, it might connect to times you've given something up or wish someone had sacrificed for you. The tears are like a map to your emotional landscape, showing what matters most deeply to you. What's remarkable is that this emotional responsiveness doesn't make you gullible or easily manipulated. In fact, research suggests the opposite. People who engage emotionally with fiction tend to be better at critical thinking in real situations because they've practiced considering multiple perspectives and emotional realities. They've spent time inhabiting other people's experiences, which actually makes them more sophisticated thinkers. Some people feel embarrassed about crying during movies, like it reveals weakness or instability. But the truth is, the ability to be moved by story is one of the most fundamentally human traits we have. It's how we've transmitted knowledge, values, and meaning for thousands of years. Before writing, Before recorded history, we had stories. And those stories moved people to tears, then just like they do now. The physical act of crying also creates a sense of catharsis, a release of built-up emotional tension. Modern life is full of stress, frustration, and suppressed feelings. We're constantly holding back, keeping it professional, staying strong. Movies give us a reason and a space to let that pressure valve release. You walk out of the theater feeling lighter, cleansed, more balanced. The tears weren't weakness. They were necessary maintenance for your emotional system. Here's something most people don't realize. The ability to cry at movies actually decreases when you're depressed or emotionally numb. If you've noticed you can't cry at movies anymore when you used to, it might be a sign that something in your emotional system has shut down. The tears aren't the problem. The absence of tears might be the warning signal. Understanding this changes how you see those moments in the theater. You're not being silly or overdramatic. You're experiencing one of the most sophisticated features of human consciousness, the ability to feel deeply about experiences beyond your own, to connect with universal human emotions, to process your own life through the lens of story. It's beautiful, it's healthy, and it's deeply human. But emotional expression isn't limited to tears. Some people express their inner world through constant conversation, and what drives that behavior is absolutely fascinating. 4. People who never stop talking, what the mind reveals. We all know someone who fills every silence with words. They narrate their thoughts, recount stories with excessive detail, and seem physically incapable of just sitting quietly. Conversations with them feel less like exchanges and more like monologues you're trapped in. It's easy to write them off as self-centered or attention-seeking, but the psychology behind constant talking reveals something far more complex and often heartbreaking. Excessive talking is frequently a response to anxiety, not confidence. People who talk non-stop are often deeply uncomfortable with silence because silence feels like judgment. In their mind, if they stop talking, people will have space to think negative thoughts about them. So they fill every gap with words, creating a protective barrier of sound between themselves and potential criticism. The talking isn't about loving their own voice. It's about drowning out the voice of their inner critic. There's also something called cognitive overflow happening in many constant talkers. Their brain generates thoughts faster than average, and speaking becomes a way to process that mental traffic. It's not that they want to dominate conversation. It's that their mind is like a highway with too many cars, and talking is how they prevent a pileup. They think out loud because keeping it all inside creates overwhelming mental pressure. For many of these individuals, talking is how they connect. They didn't learn other ways to build relationships or show care. Maybe they grew up in a family where conversation was how love was expressed, where silence meant anger or disconnection. So they replicate that pattern, not realizing that others might experience connection differently. To them, talking equals closeness. Silence equals distance. They're actually trying to create intimacy through words, but it often has the opposite effect. The social feedback loop is crucial here. When someone talks a lot, people around them gradually stop trying to contribute. The constant talker notices this and interprets it as disinterest, which makes them talk even more to try to re-engage people. They're caught in a cycle where their solution to the problem is actually making the problem worse, but they can't see it from inside the pattern. There's often unprocessed trauma lurking beneath excessive talking. Some people learned early that being entertaining, engaging, or helpful through words was how they stayed safe or earned love. Maybe they had to talk to de-escalate conflict, or maybe they got attention only when they performed verbally. That childhood survival strategy became a fixed adult personality trait. They're still trying to earn safety and love through constant verbal output. Neuroscience shows that some constant talkers have different activity levels in their frontal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and social regulation. It's not that they're choosing to be rude or domineering. Their brain literally has a harder time putting the brakes on verbal impulses. They have a thought, and before they can evaluate whether it's the right time to share it, the words are already out of their mouth. What makes this particularly challenging is that constant talkers rarely realize how much they talk. Their internal experience doesn't match external reality. If you told them they spoke for 20 minutes straight, they'd be genuinely shocked. They'd say it felt like maybe 5 minutes. Time perception gets distorted when you're in your own head, lost in the flow of your thoughts. They're not intentionally monopolizing, they're genuinely unaware of the imbalance. Many excessive talkers are also filling silence because they find their own thoughts uncomfortable. When they stop talking, they have to be alone with their mind, and that's a scary place. Maybe they have anxious thoughts, or regrets, or worries that crowd in the moment things get quiet. Talking becomes a form of distraction from their own internal experience. It's not about communicating with you, it's about escaping from themselves. Interestingly, research shows that many constant talkers are actually deeply lonely. They talk a lot, but don't feel heard or understood. They're trying so hard to connect that they prevent real connection from forming. It's like standing so close to a painting that you can't see what it depicts. Their desperate attempts to reach people push people away, creating the exact isolation they're trying to avoid. The most painful part is that underneath all that talking is usually someone who desperately wants genuine two-way connection. They want someone to ask them meaningful questions. They want to be understood, not just heard. But they never learned how to create space for that kind of exchange. They learned to perform, to entertain, to fill space, but not to genuinely share and receive. Here's what most people miss. When someone talks excessively, they're showing you their deepest fear. They're afraid of being invisible, irrelevant, or forgotten. Every word is a bid for significance, a plea to matter. It's not arrogance. It's actually deep insecurity dressed up as confidence. They're trying to prove their worth through sheer volume of output. Understanding this doesn't mean you have to endure endless monologues, but it does shift how you interpret the behavior. That person who won't stop talking isn't trying to torture you. They're trying to survive social interaction using the only tools they have. They're managing their anxiety, their loneliness, their need to matter, all through the medium of words. The saddest irony is that if they could just be quiet for a moment, if they could tolerate silence and stillness, they might actually get the connection they're searching for. But silence feels like death to them, so they keep talking, keep filling space, keep pushing away the very thing they most desperately need. Now, while communication style reveals our inner world, even our beverage choices hold surprising psychological truths. 5. The hidden side of coffee lovers. Walk into any office in the morning and you'll see them. The people clutching their coffee mugs like lifelines, declaring they can't function until they've had their first cup. It seems like simple caffeine dependency, right? Just a chemical need for a stimulant. But psychology reveals that coffee lovers are displaying a fascinating set of personality traits and coping mechanisms that have nothing to do with the caffeine itself. People who genuinely love coffee, not just tolerate it, tend to share a specific psychological profile. They're often what researchers call sensation seekers, people who crave intense experiences and novel stimulation. Coffee provides that little jolt, that small burst of intensity that their nervous system craves. It's not just about waking up. It's about feeling something sharp and immediate in a world that often feels dull and routine. There's also a deep connection between coffee drinking and control. Think about the ritual: choosing the beans, deciding on the brewing method, getting the temperature just right, adding cream or sugar in precise amounts. For people who feel like so much of life is outside their control, coffee becomes this small domain where everything can be exactly how they want it. It's predictable, customizable, controllable. In a chaotic world, that morning cup is a moment of order. The social aspect of coffee culture reveals even more. Coffee shops became the modern equivalent of public squares, places where people go to feel connected without having to actually interact deeply. You can sit alone but surrounded by others, getting the psychological benefits of community without the demands of actual relationship. For introverts and socially anxious people, coffee shops are perfect. You look busy, you fit in, but you don't have to perform. Research shows that coffee lovers are more likely to be morning people who have trained themselves to function early rather than natural early risers. They've essentially used coffee as a tool to reshape their circadian rhythm, forcing their body into a schedule that doesn't come naturally. The coffee dependence is actually evidence of an ongoing battle between their biology and their life demands. They're chemically overriding what their body wants to do. There's a darker element too. Many heavy coffee drinkers are using it as self-medication for underlying issues like depression or chronic fatigue. The temporary energy boost masks deeper problems. They're not just tired because they didn't sleep well. They're tired because something fundamental is off, whether it's mental health, physical health, or life circumstances that are draining them. The coffee becomes a band-aid on a wound that needs actual treatment. What's fascinating is the identity aspect. Coffee lovers often make their coffee preference part of their personality. They're espresso people or cold brew people. They have strong opinions about roasts and origins. This identity building around a beverage is really about creating distinctiveness. In a world where so much feels generic and mass-produced, having specific refined tastes makes people feel unique and interesting. The coffee isn't just a drink. It's a statement about who they are. The ritual component can't be overstated. For many people, that morning coffee routine is the only predictable, pleasant thing in their day. It's 5 minutes where they know exactly what will happen and how it will feel. That predictability is psychologically powerful, especially for people dealing with uncertainty or stress in other areas of life. The ritual creates an anchor, a stable point in shifting circumstances. Neuroscience reveals that habitual coffee drinkers have actually altered their brain chemistry. Their adenosine receptors have changed in response to regular caffeine intake. What this means is that their baseline state without coffee is actually below normal. They're not drinking coffee to feel energized. They're drinking it to feel normal. They've created a dependency where the absence of coffee is now a deficit state. There's also interesting research on pain tolerance. Coffee drinkers tend to have higher pain thresholds than non-drinkers. This might seem random, but it connects to a broader pattern. People who seek out intense sensations, whether through coffee, spicy food, extreme sports, or other means, are often trying to feel alive, to break through emotional numbness or disconnection. The physical intensity creates a gateway to feeling anything at all. Many coffee lovers are also perfectionists and high achievers. The coffee supports their drive to do more, be more, produce more. It's fuel for an engine that's already running too hard. They're not drinking coffee for pleasure. They're drinking it to maintain an unsustainable pace. The coffee habit is really a symptom of a deeper issue: the inability to rest, to be enough without constantly proving their worth through productivity. Here's something most people don't connect. Coffee culture exploded at the same time that work-life balance collapsed. Coffee became essential as people were expected to do more with less time. The normalization of coffee dependency parallels the normalization of exhaustion. We made it cute and quirky to need coffee to function, but really, we were masking a collective burnout. The most interesting psychological element is this: coffee drinkers are often running from something. Maybe it's boredom, maybe it's painful emotions, maybe it's existential emptiness. The coffee provides stimulation, distraction, a reason to pause but not actually be still. It's activity without reflection. You're doing something, but you're not confronting anything. Understanding all this doesn't mean coffee is bad or that enjoying it is pathological. But it does reveal that our relationship with coffee often tells a story about what we're avoiding, what we're controlling, and what we're trying to feel. That morning cup holds more than caffeine. It holds our hopes for the day, our coping strategies, and our unexamined needs. And just as our drink preferences reveal hidden truths, so do our seating choices in everyday life. 6. The truth about people who prefer window seats. Whether it's on an airplane, a train, a bus, or even in a restaurant, some people always gravitate toward the window. It seems like a simple preference, maybe about the view or having a wall to lean on. But psychology reveals that this choice is actually communicating something profound about how these individuals experience the world and manage their inner emotional landscape. Window seat preference is fundamentally about control and escape. People who choose windows are often those who need to feel like they have an out, even if it's just symbolic. The window represents possibility, a view beyond the immediate confined space. Psychologically, it reduces the feeling of being trapped. These individuals tend to have lower tolerance for feeling restricted or confined, whether physically or in life circumstances. There's a strong connection to introspection. Window seaters are more likely to be internal processors, people who think through things alone rather than by talking them out. They prefer the window because it gives them something external to focus on, while their mind works through internal material. The passing scenery becomes a backdrop for their thoughts, a moving meditation that helps them process emotions and ideas. Research shows that window preference correlates with a need for personal space and clear boundaries. These individuals are protective of their psychological territory. They don't want people on all sides of them. They want at least one direction that's open, unoccupied, safe. It's not unfriendliness. It's about managing sensory input and social demands. Having that window position means fewer directions from which demands can come. Many window seaters are also what psychologists call highly sensitive people. They pick up more from their environment than average, which means they get overwhelmed more easily. The window provides a buffer. It's one less side where people can crowd them, talk to them, or invade their space. They're not being antisocial. They're managing their nervous system's tendency toward overstimulation. There's often a dreamer quality to these individuals. They're the people who stare out windows as children, who get lost in their imagination, who see possibility where others see just sky or buildings or landscape. The window feeds something in them that needs beauty, space, and the feeling that there's more to life than what's immediately in front of them. They're romantics, even if they don't think of themselves that way. The desire for windows also connects to a need for control over their experience. Window seaters don't have to ask someone to move when they need to get up. They don't have to negotiate or manage someone else's needs. They can look out whenever they want, rest their head where they want, control their immediate environment. For people who feel like so much of life is dictated by others, the window seat is a small domain of complete autonomy. Interestingly, window preference often develops in childhood as a coping mechanism. Maybe they took long car rides and learned to escape boredom or family tension by staring out the window. Maybe they felt powerless in other areas and the window became their private world. That childhood pattern solidifies into an adult preference that feels like simple taste, but is actually a deeply ingrained coping strategy. There's also an element of observation without participation. Window seaters can watch the world without being fully in it. They have one foot in and one foot out, always able to pull back and observe rather than engage completely. This reflects a broader life pattern. They're often the ones analyzing situations, seeing patterns others miss, precisely because they maintain that slight distance. Many window seaters struggle with a fear of missing out, but not in the social media sense. They fear missing the moment when something meaningful happens, when the light hits just right, when they see something that matters. The window keeps them connected to possibility, to the chance that something significant might appear in their field of vision. They're scanning for meaning, for beauty, for something that makes sense of the ordinary. The psychology also reveals control over visibility. When you're in a window seat, fewer people can see you. You're tucked against the edge, partially hidden. For people who feel self-conscious or watched, this is enormous relief. They can relax slightly because they're not on display from all angles. The window protects them from feeling exposed. What's really striking is how window seaters handle connection. They're often deeply loyal and caring in close relationships but struggle with shallow social interactions. The window represents their need for depth over breadth, for meaningful singular focus rather than dispersed attention. They'd rather look deeply at one thing, the view, than superficially at many things, other passengers. Research also shows that window seaters are more likely to be contemplative about mortality and meaning. The window, especially on planes, reminds them of perspective, of how small they are, of the vastness beyond their individual concerns. This doesn't depress them. It actually soothes something in them that needs to remember. There's more than just their immediate problems and pressures. Here's the profound truth. People who always choose the window are often managing a fundamental tension between wanting to be part of the world and needing to protect themselves from it. They want to see, to experience, to witness, but from a position of safety. The window lets them engage with life while maintaining the boundary they need to not get overwhelmed by it. Understanding this reframes the behavior entirely. The person who insists on the window seat isn't being difficult or picky. They're making a choice that helps them manage their psychological needs in a world that often feels too loud, too crowded, too demanding. That window is their compromise between isolation and connection, between participation and observation. And recognizing this in yourself or others creates compassion. We all have our ways of managing the overwhelming nature of existence. For some, it's arriving early. For others, it's talking constantly. And for some, it's sitting by the window, looking out at the world while staying protected from its intensity. Each behavior is a strategy, a way of surviving while remaining human, of staying open while protecting what's vulnerable inside.